Some of you may have heard the story, it made international news, about how an AI-powered series of pictures about Brad Pitt were involved in a phishing scam in France. A 53-year-old woman named Anne thought she had a year-and-a-half-long relationship with the movie star. And in that, he told her things like, I want to send you a very nice gift, but I can't pay for the customs because my divorce with Angelina Jolie has all my bank accounts frozen. So she sent him $9,000. And then he said, for the same reason, I can't pay for my cancer treatment. I'm keeping it quiet, but I have kidney cancer. And he sent her all of these fake pictures. They look fake to you, but someone who thinks they're in love with Brad Pitt didn't see it. She ended up sending him not him, of course, it wasn't really him, them, whoever they are, wherever in the world they were, $850,000. Her entire life savings, at which point, of course, they disappeared because they had all her money. We know that vulnerable people are the easiest ones to scam. Therefore, vulnerable people will be the ones targeted by scammers. They go after people that are vulnerable. That's what they do. This poor woman has attempted suicide multiple times since this all came out because a national television show in France highlighted her story, I guess without her permission, when they found out about it, and it's led to this whole mess. Why did I think about this? I thought about this, of course, it's been recent news, but about people who are vulnerable and about those willing to take advantage of them, because that's what's happening in our text this morning. Let's turn to Genesis 22, starting in verse 20. It says, let me try again. Sometime later, Abraham was told, Milcah is also a mother. She has borne sons to your brother Nahor. Uz, the firstborn, Buz, his brother, Kemuel, the father of Aram, Kesed, Hazo, Pildash, Jidlaph, and Bethuel. Bethuel became the father of Rebekah. Milcah bore these 8 sons to Abraham's brother Nahor. His concubine, whose name was Remuah, also had sons, Tabah, Gaham, Tahash, and Maachah. The guy had 12 sons. That's a lot, of course. Jacob's gonna match that in a couple of generations. So this is after Abraham's faith has been tested. We saw that with Isaac on the mountain last week. And life has returned to the new normal, whatever that is. It's hard to imagine that some things about Abraham, Sarah, and Isaac were not permanently changed by the ordeal of Isaac's near death. You don't go through that without it leaving a lasting impact. But life goes on. Life goes on even when we suffer through traumatic moments. And this is an example. Abraham receives news about the significant expansion of his brother Nahor's family. Now, the Christmas card photo, or whatever the ancient Near Eastern equivalent would have been, that Abraham would send back has got a lot less people in it, right? He's got his 12 sons. Abraham's just got Isaac. But it's good news for his family. Now, there's only one name in this that jumps out at us, of course, and that is the name of the only woman listed, Abraham's great-niece Rebekah. She'll be central to the narrative next week, so this is setting that up. We're told that Sarah lived to be 127 years old. She died at Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham went to mourn for Sarah and weep over her. I suppose I should pause and tell you what those photos are so you're not just sitting there wondering what there are. On the left is the garden tomb that may or may not be the actual tomb of Christ. The one in the middle is in the Church of Holy Sepulchre. That is the building that they built over the traditional site of the tomb. So those are the two competing tombs. And on the right is actually the tomb of the patriarchs in Hebron. And we're going to be talking about that. That's the one we're talking about, but there are no good pictures of the inside that I could use. The picture on the left is similar to the kind of tomb that we're going to be talking about. So any which way, Isaac is now a young man. He's ready to begin his own journey, right? To find a wife, to have children, to move forward. But that step in God's plan, the plan that's going to turn Abraham's descendants into a people, pauses because Isaac's mother, Sarah, has died. The text specifically takes the time to tell us about Abraham's grief at losing his wife after their many years of marriage. As the story moves forward, remember that Abraham is a man in mourning for his wife. That emotional state will be central to what is happening in this text. We're told that Abraham rose from beside his dead wife and spoke to the Hittites. He said, "I'm a foreigner and stranger among you. Sell me some property for a burial site here so I can bury my dead." So the intro to what Abraham does next emphasizes once again his state of mind. He's going directly from sitting beside his wife's body to making burial arrangements for her. This can be an emotional and traumatic experience for people. I've seen many times, including this week when there was an unexpected funeral, how the questions of funeral homes and visitation times and services and burial plots can overwhelm those who really just need to focus on grieving, not on things related to logistics and money. Many of you will already have much of this prearranged. Some have it prepaid. I would say if you can do that, it's a burden lifted off of your loved ones in the future. Not to bring this message into morbid territory, but we are talking about making arrangements for a loved one who died. I would say that I would much rather plan out scripture readings and hymns and eulogies and all of that with you now rather than with your loved ones after the fact when they say to me, "I don't know what she liked. I don't know, just pick something." Over the years, only a couple of the people of this church have come to me and said, "Here's the songs I want, here's the scripture readings I want, write that down." This is kind of an invitation. If you're willing to do that, if you have some in mind, if you're just going to say, "Oh, I don't care, Pastor, pick whatever you want," then it doesn't matter. But if you actually want some of certain songs or readings, or if you want someone to give a eulogy, let me know ahead of time, because that's so much easier. That was just a little public service announcement that this made me think of. Let's go back to Abraham's story. He's up front about the added concern that is in the way of burying Sarah. He says, "We are foreigners here. We own no land." It was customary in the ancient Near East to be buried in the land of your ancestors. That's where everybody wanted to be buried, no matter where you died. We will see that at the end of Genesis, spoiler alert, when Joseph says, when they say, "Bring my bones back to this land when you come back." That's that same idea. To Abraham and Sarah, Canaan is now that land. Their descendants will be buried here. But others own the land now. So Abraham needs to buy a tomb, probably a cave. That's what they usually used. There's a lot of caves. He needs to put down roots in this land in a way that would be deeply symbolic and meaningful to him. And of course, to Isaac. This is a very big deal. The Hittites replied to Abraham, "Sir, listen to us. You're a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. None of us will refuse you his tomb for burying your dead." The initial response of Abraham's neighbors in the Hebron area is extremely gracious. It seems that they respect Abraham and are willing to let him use one of their own tombs, even the nicest tomb, to bury Sarah. Now, if we wish to be generous in our assessment of these folks, this is the only thing we know about them, and it's one moment in their lives as they interact with Abraham. We could call this a sincere offer made in good faith. And that's what I'm going to do, because we have more than enough folk in our world today assuming the worst about other people on social media. I'm pretty sick of it. I'm sure you are too. So let's assume, for now, that their offer to treat Abraham like a part of their own tribe is an act of kindness. Then Abraham rose and bowed down before the people of the land, the Hittites. He said to them, "If you are willing to let me bury my dead, then listen to me and intercede with Ephron, son of Zohar, on my behalf. So he will sell me the cave of Machpelah, which belongs to him and is at the end of his field. Ask him to sell it to me for the full price as a burial site among you." So at this point, we need some cultural understanding of the ancient Near East to figure out why Abraham didn't take that initial offer and use one of the Hittite tombs. As I mentioned, they offered to treat him like an honorary member of their tribe. Abraham's response is to insist, "I'm my own tribe. I need to own the burial tomb in order to assert independence from the tribes that surround these nomadic dwelling places that Abraham has had." So along those lines, Abraham offers to pay the full price for the cave, which shouldn't be all that much. It's just a cave at the end of a field, right? He wants to ensure that nobody thinks he's getting a family discount. He's not a part of their tribe. He can't act in a way that would let people think that he is. So while this entire episode has the component of a business transaction, it's really not about ancient Near Eastern economics at all. Rather, this whole story is about identity. Abraham's persistence is a sign of who he is. And who he is the person that God has proclaimed him to be. God has said, "I will make you the father of many nations, and the one that comes through Isaac will inherit all this land one day." Therefore, Abraham cannot, under any circumstances, allow his singular identity as the one whom God has chosen to be his instrument to be compromised through even small steps of assimilation with the local Canaanites. He can't do it. So keep that value that Abraham is holding on to quite dearly. Keep it in mind at the start of next week's message about Rebekah, because it propels that story too. That same theme is in next week's message. Ephron the Hittite was sitting among his people, and he replied to Abraham in the hearing of all the Hittites who had come to the gate of his city, "No, my lord," he said, "listen to me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that's in it. I give it to you in the presence of my people. Bury your dead." At this point, Abraham has made his need to remain independent from his neighbors clear to them. He's offered to pay full price. We don't know if Abraham and Ephron have had any prior interactions on a social or business level, but since Abraham is seeking to buy his cave, he now comes front and center and takes the lead. And how does he respond? Take note of this as we think about his response. This entire interaction, we're told, plays out publicly. If anyone else in this town had an objection to how either Abraham or Ephron was treated, they could have spoken up. But throughout this, they will be silent. And silence is, in many cases, a form of acceptance. By not speaking up, Ephron's neighbors put a subtle but real stamp of approval on what is about to happen. At first glance, Ephron's offer seems even more generous than the first offer by the group. They collectively offered to treat Abraham like family. Now Ephron is asking Abraham, just take it. Not only the cave, you can have the field next to it for free. That's the kind of generosity one would expect of a lifelong friend, of a beloved relative. So Ephron's the good guy, right? Actually, no. Because he knows that Abraham cannot accept this offer. And he knows that because this is taking place publicly, Abraham will have to counteroffer on his terms. Because he knows that Abraham's independence, which he just heard Abraham declare to be precious to him, will not allow Abraham to accept this gift. Why? Simple. One reason is that Ephron's heirs could demand the field and the tomb back after he dies. That's the way their legal system worked. He couldn't give the land away permanently. He could only sell it permanently. They would not be bound by his gift. And another is the idea we've seen before in Genesis. Back when Abraham was involved with rescuing Lot, remember, there was a bunch of plunder. And the king of Sodom said in Genesis 14, you can have your share. Abraham responded by saying, I will accept nothing belonging to you, so that you will never be able to say, I made Abraham rich. Just as Abraham cannot allow himself to be assimilated into the Canaanite people and their culture, neither can he allow himself to be in their debt. He can't allow himself to be beholden to their whims in the future, should they choose to revoke the right to use this burial space. He can't do that. Ephron is no fool. He knows what Abraham is going to be forced, because of this seemingly generous offer, to respond with. He knows exactly what Abraham is about to say. He's actually counting on that response for a reason that will be clear shortly. Nobody witnessing this play out will be surprised by what happens next, including Abraham. Ephron has set this up for a reason, which we will see. Abraham will play along for his own reason, and the witnesses will stay silent for their reasons. Nobody is surprised by what is about to happen. Culturally speaking, it's the only thing that could happen next. Again, Abraham bowed down before the people of the land, and he said to Ephron in their hearing, listen to me, if you will, I will pay the price of the field. Accept it from me so I can bury my dead there. Now, here's your moment of pop culture. The nerd in me wants to yell out, wants to shout to Abraham using Admiral Akbar's voice, it's a trap! Is that a decent Admiral Akbar? So none of you. Return of the Jedi, come on people, it's a trap! I think Abraham knows it's a trap. Nobody needs to tell him it's a trap. He's a grieving widower. He needs to own a tomb to bury his beloved wife for both cultural and religious reasons. He needs it. In short, Abraham was in a vulnerable position. He's in a place of desperation. So he moved ahead, knowing that it's going to be costly, knowing that it's a trap on one level. An act of love towards Sarah is worth the price, whatever it is. Even if it's going to be high, when you spend your resources, your money to help those you love, it's a no-brainer, right? But that truth doesn't make this right. Now, we've seen similar things in our own lives or in the lives of those we care about. When someone is backed into a corner, even the distasteful or the costly choices end up being the ones that get embraced. When you don't have choices, what else can you do but take that one? And he does. Ephron answered Abraham, "Listen to me, my lord. The land's worth 400 shekels of silver. But what's that between you and me? Bury your dead." The price that Ephron puts on his field is difficult for us to truly quantify. We don't know enough about the economic situation of this time and place. But what we do know is that this 7.5 pounds of silver asked by Ephron for this field and, the cave is some level of price gouging. If this had truly been a deal between friends, or at least a fair deal, Ephron would have set a price much lower as a sign of respect, right? Given the reason why Abraham needs to buy a piece of land today. Now, this has massive parallels in our legal and economic system. Among the many such examples of people and businesses willing to take advantage of vulnerable people, these ones stand out to me. And this is not an exhaustive list, but it's going to take all the rest of this backside of the page to talk about. It's enough of a list. Number 1, payday advance schemes. The interest charged is often ruinous and hurts the poorest people amongst us who are desperate. Casinos and other gambling establishments, including the ones run by state governments, those who can least afford to throw their money away on lotto tickets and scratch-offs, sports gamblings, and games of chance, they typically gamble more than people with disposable income because they're desperate. This entire industry is built upon the advantage the house knows that it has because the house can do the math. They know the true odds. The gamblers fool themselves into thinking that the odds are better than they really are. The third group, the medical scams. There are way too many of these to count. Some claim if you buy this, if you use this thing, you'll prevent a disease. Some claim that they can cure a condition. What they're really doing is stealing from others who have the misfortune of being ill or being afraid of becoming ill, and that makes them vulnerable. The fourth group are the political and religious fundraising schemes. Now, sometimes these are legitimate, but many of them traffic in fear or greed or both. They promise things they know they cannot deliver. And they use that money, the money given from people who can ill afford often to make those donations, to live extravagant lifestyles of ostentatious wealth. The religious figures in particular who do this will be judged by the Lord most harshly when they stand before their Maker. Lastly, number 5, and again, I could have kept going, the straight-up scammers who go after the elderly, the lonely, the least educated with lies and deceptions designed to steal as much money as possible before disappearing. Often, and this is little known but has come to light in recent years, the call centers, the computer farms overseas where most of these scams are being run are actually controlled by organized crime, sometimes by terrorist organizations. The workers who are making these scams happen are not getting the money. They are being held against their will. They were probably lured there with a scam that said, "Come to here for a good job." And when they got there, their passport was taken away. They were kept in locked housing behind gates with armed guards. They are, in essence, modern-day slaves being forced to steal from Westerners and other people that have wealth. We could list more. Sadly, we could list more. We could talk about wage theft and counterfeit goods. We could talk about cryptocurrencies and all sorts of scams to steal from government programs like Social Security and Medicaid. We could talk about Wall Street and the various get-rich-quick schemes like the ones that led to the '08 financial crisis. We could talk about unscrupulous landlords. We could talk about unscrupulous tenants. Working here, I've had plenty of interaction with both. And Cheryl is shaking her head because she knows. We have both in this community. On and on we could talk. The sad truth is, taking advantage of the vulnerable is a significant portion of legal economic activity in our world. In most of the cases I just mentioned, nobody broke any laws. They will never be prosecuted. There's no recompense because it was legal. It's tolerated by those in power, sometimes used by those in power in our world today. So that was uplifting and encouraging. You can thank me for it later. What do we do about it? We need this part. As followers of Jesus Christ, number one, we first off refuse to imitate this behavior. We will not gain by taking advantage of others. We just won't do it. Others may choose to do so, but our love for our fellow human beings, even strangers, even our enemies, keeps us from joining them. We're not going to do this. Number two, we will speak up when we can, where we can, to not only warn those who are vulnerable, but to try to shape the behavior of others such that those who are parasitical of the vulnerable, those who take advantage of them, will be known by our community for who and what they are. And number three, we will actively seek to protect the most vulnerable people in our circle of influence, especially our family, especially the elderly, especially those who could be easily taken advantage of. Now, this may require that we help them in their need so that they don't feel desperate enough to turn toward the people that are ready to take advantage of them if given the chance. Abraham agreed to Ephron's terms and weighed out for him the price he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver, according to the weight current among the merchants. Now that may have been a little bit of a rant, but honestly, it was only scratching the surface of all of the ways that we know that vulnerable people among us are being targeted. So let us go back to Abraham for a minute. As we can see, he willingly paid the inflated price because owning the tomb of Sarah meant that much to him. In the end, these schemers, these scammers, stay in business because people choose to give them their money. There's a reason why you see sports gambling commercials every other commercial sometimes, because they're making a ton of money because people are doing it. And they'll continue to do that as long as they are able because they want to make money. Abraham was taken advantage of, but because Abraham was wealthy, he could absorb the cost. This didn't truly hurt him very much. Most people who are victimized are not in his shoes, and the money they lose is extremely costly. So, Ephron's field in Machpelah near Mamre, both the field and the cave in it, and all the trees within the borders of the field was deeded to Abraham as his property in the presence of all the Hittites who had come to the gate of the city. This is the only piece of property in the Promised Land that Abraham owned in his lifetime. It thus takes on a symbolic importance in later generations as a reminder that God had promised the entirety of the land to Abraham's descendants. That dream was at the forefront of their collective memories when Moses composed Genesis while leading them his now numerous descendants out of Egypt, across Sinai to the promised land. This story would have been very powerful for them, coming to reclaim the whole land when Abraham owned just this field and a tomb. Afterward, Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre, which is at Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So the field and the cave in it were deeded to Abraham by the Hittites as a burial site. The purported site of this cave is now an Islamic mosque in Hebron. It's the building on the right. Its buildings were first erected actually by King Herod, way back, King Herod, to provide a place of prayer at the grave of Sarah, but also Abraham, Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, and Leah, who will all eventually share this same cave as their final resting place. It becomes, of course, known as the tomb of the patriarchs. When the Mamelukes conquered Hebron in the 14th century, they forbade Jewish entry into the site, which before that had been a Crusader church, which before that, etc., etc. They transformed it into the aforementioned mosque. After 1967, the Six-Day War, it was reopened to Jewish pilgrims. Now, before the recent violence of the last 2 years, 300,000 people came to this tomb every year. The modern city of Hebron, in case you're wondering, has about 700 Jewish settlers and 200,000 Palestinians living in it. It's a place where violence has happened in the past and is happening in the current struggles. In the end, despite his neighbor's willingness to take advantage of his grief, Abraham laid Sarah to rest in the promised land. The first Jew of a long line to follow that call to make this land home. So what do we take from this text? 3 things I want you to remember. Number 1, to Abraham it was culturally and religiously necessary that Sarah's tomb be in the promised land on a plot of ground he owned. That's why he's so stubborn in this. Number 2, seeing this need, his neighbor took advantage of Abraham, much as countless other vulnerable people have been swindled in history, and countless continue to be in our world today. Lastly, our place then is on the side of the vulnerable. So let us do everything in our power to protect them from would-be predators.